Poor Waitress helped an old woman every day, until Mafia Boss and his 4 gang members showed up. The rain in Harborview. New Jersey had a way of washing the color out of the world, leaving only shades of gray and the slick, wet black of the pavement. At Marna's Grill, a 24/7 diner hunched near the deserted docks. The neon sign sputtered, casting a weak, buzzing pink light that died before it hit the street. It was 3 a.m. The coffee was stale, and the only customers were ghosts, or men too tired to go home. Tessa Marlowe wiped down the counter for the 10th time, the scent of bleach and old grease clinging to her apron. She was running on fumes, a double shift that bled into this graveyard slot. But the hospital bills for her sister, Piper, waited for no one, and sleep was a luxury she could not afford. In the corner booth, the one with the cracked vinyl, sat Alma Serafino. Alma was a fixture of these dead-of-night hours. A tiny, frail woman with paper-thin skin and eyes that held too many secrets. She came in every night, just after midnight, and Tessa always brought her a steaming bowl of the soup of the day and a heel of bread. It never made it onto a ticket. Tessa would just mark it as spoiled on the kitchen log. The owner, Marna, was too cheap to pay for cameras that worked and too tired to notice. Tessa set the bowl down. "Careful. Alma, it's hot." Alma nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled the bowl closer. She had her rituals. She always took the booth that faced the counter, her back to the front door, allowing her to watch the entire diner, and the street outside, in the long, age-spotted mirror that ran the length of the wall. Sometimes, when she thought no one was listening, she would whisper to herself in rapid, low Italian. Tessa only ever caught a few words, the same ones, over and over. La torre campanaria suona ancora. The bell tower still rings. Tessa just assumed it was the rambling of old age, a memory stuck on repeat. Tonight, the rain turned violent, hammering the windows with a force that made the glass shudder. The front door flew open with a crash, sucking the warm, stale air out and dragging in a cold, wet gust that smelled of the harbor and something metallic. 5 men. They did not look like they were seeking shelter. They looked like they owned the storm. All of them wore dark, expensive coats that dripped water onto the checkered linoleum. Their shoes were Italian leather, soaked but immaculate. They moved as one, absorbing all the light and sound in the small diner, making the space feel suddenly, terrifyingly small. The man in the lead was in his early 30s, with a face that was too beautiful to be kind. It was all sharp angles, dark hair slicked back, and eyes that were a cold, flat gray. A palpable aura of protection surrounded him. The other 4 flanked him, 2 slightly ahead, 2 slightly behind. He was Cassian Varelli. His 4 companions were a study in controlled menace. Nero, broad and watchful. Silas, thin and precise, his eyes never stopping. Jax Calder, who looked like a brawler stuffed into a $1,000 suit. And Beaumont Rye, who smiled, which was somehow the most frightening thing of all. They radiated an energy, a shared understanding of dirty work. They did not ask if the diner was open. They simply advanced, stopping at the counter where Tessa stood frozen. Cassian Varelli did not look at her. His attention was on the diner, his gaze sweeping the room before landing, with chilling accuracy, on the corner booth. He reached inside his coat and tossed a photograph onto the counter. It slid across the damp formica and stopped in front of Tessa. It was old. The colors faded, but the woman in it was undeniable. She was middle-aged, draped in pearls, standing before a sun-drenched Italian villa. She looked regal, powerful, and an exact younger version of the frail woman huddled in the booth. "This woman," Cassian's voice said, low and smooth, with no trace of an accent, clean of any obvious threat, was declared dead 18 years ago. In the corner, Alma's hand spasmed, rattling her spoon against the ceramic bowl. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. She did not think. She acted. She grabbed the heavy steel soup ladle from the steam well, a laughably pathetic weapon, and moved, placing her body between the counter and Alma's booth. It was a stupid, instinctive gesture of protection. The move was so unexpected, so genuinely civilian, that it made Cassian Varelli pause. He finally looked at Tessa, truly looked at her. His gray eyes assessed her, the cheap uniform, the exhaustion, the defiant, terrified grip on the ladle. A flicker of something amusement, or perhaps just curiosity, passed over his face. He dismissed her just as quickly, his eyes moving past her to Alma, who was trying to sink into the shadows of the booth. "If she is alive," Cassian continued, his voice dropping even lower, "someone is keeping her from my family, and that someone is here." His gaze flicked back to Tessa, sharp and accusatory. The air in the diner turned to glass. It was so quiet Tessa could hear the stuttering buzz of the neon sign outside. "I don't know what you're talking about," Tessa said, her voice shaking only slightly. "She's just an old woman. She comes here for soup." "Tessa, please," Alma whispered, her voice frail. The four men began to move. They did not rush. Jax Calder headed toward the back, checking the storeroom. Silas walked the perimeter of the diner, looking into the empty booths, his hand inside his coat. They overturned empty vegetable crates, checked the locks on the back door. They made the diner, Tessa's small, safe world, feel like a cage being inspected. Cassian Varelli watched Alma. He leaned forward, placing a single black card on the counter. It was heavy stock, bearing only a name and an emblem: Varelli Trust Holdings, a company that did not exist in any public directory. He turned to leave, the four men falling into formation around him. At the door, he paused and looked back, not at Alma, but at Tessa. "Tell her the bell tower at San Aurelio still rings." He said the words Alma always muttered, "and next time, I won't come in alone." The door closed, leaving only the scent of cold rain and the sudden, suffocating silence. The moment the diner door closed, the false bravado holding Alma Serafino upright vanished. She collapsed back into the vinyl booth, not as a frail old woman, but as a terrified one. The shaking was no longer a tremor of age. It was the raw, deep shudder of pure fear. Tessa's ladle clattered onto the floor. She rushed over, sliding into the booth opposite the woman who was suddenly a stranger. "Alma, who were they? What did they mean? The bell tower." Alma's eyes, usually milky and distant, were now sharp, lucid and filled with a terror that chilled Tessa to the bone. "They found me," she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. The accent she sometimes fumbled with was gone, replaced by precise, clear English. "After 18 years, they finally found me." She grabbed Tessa's wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "He is Cassian Varelli, the new head of the family." "Family? What family?" "The Varelli crime family," Alma said, the words hanging in the greasy air. "And I was their keeper of secrets, their consigliere of accounts." She confessed it all in a desperate, tumbling whisper. She was not just some old woman, she was Alma Serafino, the family's clandestine treasurer. Her responsibility had been the white ledger. No, not a physical book, but a digital vault, a meticulous record of every politician, every judge, every police captain in Harborview, and beyond who had been bought, bribed, or blackmailed by the Varelli family. It was the chain that kept the entire city enslaved. 18 years ago, Alma gasped. The old guard wanted to use it, not just to profit, but to control, to own everything forever. I couldn't let it happen. So she had died. A boating accident, a body never recovered. She'd vanished, taking the one thing they could not replicate: the key. The bell code, and she said, her eyes frantic. A sequence of tones, from the bells at the old villa, a melody only I know by heart. Without it, the vault is just encrypted noise. With it, it's a weapon. "That man, Cassian," Tessa said, her mind reeling. "He wants the weapon." "Yes, but not like the others," Alma explained, her breathing shallow. "Cassian was just a young man when I left. He wasn't part of the faction that ordered my accident. Now, he is the new boss. He wants to take the family legitimate, to move their money into the light. But to do that, he must scrub the past. He needs the white ledger to know who to trust, who to cut loose, and who to bury." She leaned closer. "But there is another side." The old guard, those who loved the old ways. They are led by Rinaldo Varelli, the bellman. They call him, he wants me dead, truly dead. If I am found, the ledger is in play. If he cannot have it, he will destroy it, and me with it. Cassian finding me means the bellman is right behind him. Alma looked at the door, her entire body trembling. He will come for me. You must let me go. Child, you owe me nothing. This is not your fight. Tessa stared at her. Owed her nothing. For 3 months, this woman had sat in her booth, a quiet presence in the lonely, dead hours of the night. Tessa had poured out her worries about Piper's failing heart, about the mounting hospital bills that felt like a cement wall, and Alma had listened. She had listened when no one else was there. She had even, on one terrible, rain-soaked Tuesday, done a flawless, crackling impression of a radio DJ just to make Tessa smile. No, Tessa said, her voice firm. It was the same stupid, instinctive feeling that made her grab the ladle. You're not going anywhere alone. They'll be watching the diner. She stood up, pulling Alma by the arm. We're leaving, now. Tessa didn't take Alma to her own apartment. It was too clean, too quiet, too easily found. Instead, she led her through the back alleys of Red Point, the city's bruised and battered industrial sector, to a place where silence was a foreign concept. Hawthorne Gym. She pushed open a squealing side door and led Alma up a narrow, rickety staircase. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, rust, and stale beer. Even at this hour, the rhythmic thud of heavy bags being punched echoed up from the floor below, a constant dull percussion. Her apartment was a single, grim room above the gym, where the noise was so pervasive it was impossible to think, let alone eavesdrop. Tessa bolted the door and jammed a chair under the knob. She gave Alma her only blanket. Alma, huddled on the lumpy cot, looked at Tessa. The bell tower, at San Aurelio, our old villa in Italy. The bells, they were a code. How many chimes? In what order? It was a language only the family knew, Cassian saying that. The bell tower still rings. It was not a threat. It was a question. It was his way of offering a dialogue, of telling me he was not Rinaldo. Tessa sank onto a milk crate, the weight of the night crashing down. She was a waitress. She dealt with burnt toast and drunk longshoremen. Now she was sitting in a run-down room, hiding an ex-mafia accountant from 2 opposing forces, one led by a man who wanted to go clean, and one led by a man who wanted to silence her forever. A racking cough seized Alma. It was deep and wet, and it shook her entire frame. She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve, pressing it to her lips. When she pulled it away, Tessa saw the dark, unmistakable stain of blood. My lungs, Alma said simply, seeing Tessa's look of horror. I don't have much time. That's why I started coming to the diner. I was tired of hiding. I wanted a hot meal. I wanted to see a young person, living a normal life, just one more time. The confession settled in Tessa's gut, heavy and final. This wasn't a game. Alma was dying. Tessa's gaze fell on her own worn jacket, thrown over the chair. The black business card Cassian had left was in the pocket. She could feel its sharp edge through the fabric. Tessa pulled it out. Varelli Trust Holdings. She had a choice. She could throw this woman out, try to save herself, or she could step into the fire. She thought of Piper, fighting in a hospital bed, and Alma, fighting for time on a cot. Tessa stood up. Her decision made, she would make the call, but she would not be the terrified girl in the diner. This time, it would be on her terms. She used the gym's payphone, the greasy plastic receiver smelling of decades of sweat, to make the call. The number on the black card connected without a single ring, as if someone had been sitting by the phone, just waiting. A man's voice, not Cassian's, simply said, "Yes, I want to talk to Cassian Varelli," Tessa said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Tell him the woman he's looking for will meet him. 1 hour. The abandoned container yard off Pier 7. She set the terms. No police. He could bring his men, but if they tried anything, she and Alma would be gone. The voice on the other end just said, "He will be there." And the line clicked dead. The container yard was a graveyard of rust, a maze of towering steel boxes that groaned in the wind blowing off the river. Tessa drove the gym's battered, wheezing pickup truck, parking it deep within the maze. She had Alma bundled in blankets on the floor of the passenger side, hidden from view. "Stay down, no matter what you hear," Tessa ordered. "Tessa, this is madness," Alma whispered, her voice tight with fear. The madness was them walking into the diner. This is just the answer. Tessa got out of the truck, slamming the rusty door to make her presence known. She stood alone in a small clearing, flanked by stacks of containers, the wet air clinging to her skin. Headlights cut through the gloom. A black, sleek sedan was followed by an identical SUV. They parked, forming a V shape, their high beams pinning Tessa in a harsh, theatrical spotlight. Cassian Varelli emerged from the sedan, his 4 men fanning out from the SUV, a perfect, disciplined formation. He had kept his word. He had not come alone. He walked toward her, stopping a safe 10 yards away. He was not wearing a coat this time, just a dark suit that seemed to repel the damp. "You are brave, or you are stupid," Cassian said. His voice was calm, carrying easily in the strange acoustics of the yard. "And you," Tessa shot back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Enjoy terrifying, sick old women." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "That sick old woman is my Zia Alma. Her vanishing from our lives 18 years ago was not a quiet retirement. It was a betrayal that got my grandfather poisoned and fractured our entire organization. It left a power vacuum that monsters like Ronaldo filled." He took another step. "I am not here to terrorize her. I am here to pull her out of the line of fire, the same line of fire you just walked her into." "She was fine until you showed up," Tessa yelled, her voice echoing. "She was hiding in a diner, waiting to be found. Ronaldo's men have been sweeping the docks for 6 months. Do you think you're the only one who noticed her?" As they argued, a tiny red light appeared on the collar of Tessa's jacket. Only one of Cassian's men saw it. "Silas," he shouted one word. "Sniper." It happened in less than a second. The world exploded in a deafening crack. Silas grunted, spinning as the bullet tore through the flesh of his shoulder instead of Tessa's heart. Cassian didn't hesitate. He didn't shout. He moved. He crossed the 10 yards in 2 bounds, a blur of controlled power. He hit Tessa full force, not as an attack, but as a rescue. His arm wrapped around her waist like a steel band, lifting her off her feet. He twisted, using his own body as a shield, and dove, pulling them both down into the mud and gravel behind the solid steel wall of a shipping container. Tessa landed hard. The air knocked from her lungs, with Cassian's full weight on top of her. Her face was pressed into the fabric of his suit jacket. She was momentarily blind, her senses filled with nothing but him, the smell of expensive wool, clean leather, and the faint metallic scent of the rain. She could feel the solid, rapid beat of his heart against her cheek, the coiled spring tension in his muscles as he held her down, his head up, scanning the perimeter. This was not the cold, calculating boss. This was a man of pure, lethal reflex, and he had just saved her life. More shots echoed, sharp and different. Jax and Beaumont were returning fire, their movements a blur of tactical precision. Suppressing the threat, Cassian did not move for a long moment. He just held her, his breath warm against her hair. Then, as the shooting stopped, replaced by the shouts of his men, he shifted. He pushed himself up onto his elbows, his face just inches from hers. He pinned her with his gaze, his gray eyes dark and furious. He was too close, his presence overwhelming. "Now," he said, his voice a low, intense rumble that vibrated through her. "Now do you believe me I am not the only one looking for her?" It was a question, but it felt like an accusation. It was the first moment their eyes truly met, and there was a dangerous, unspoken fire in the space between them. Tessa was shaking, but not just from fear, from the adrenaline, the impact, the proximity. She found her voice. "You have to protect her, not just from them, from you." "That is the plan," he said. His voice clipped. "Swear it." Tessa pushed against his chest, a futile gesture. "Swear on the Varelli name that she will not be harmed." He stared at her. surprised by her demand. She was using his own world against him. A slow, dangerous half-smile touched his lips. On the Varelli name, Zia Alma will be protected. He rolled off her, rising to his feet in one fluid motion and pulling her up with him. "She's in the truck," Tessa said, wiping mud from her face. Cassian nodded to Nero, who went to retrieve Alma. "We are all leaving. You and Alma are coming with me. We have a safe house on the East Pier." Alma emerged from the truck, her face pale but her gaze steady. She looked at the grown man Cassian had become, the bleeding Silas, the bullet-riddled container. "You've made a mess, Cassian," she said, her voice dry. He looked at her, and for a second the boss disappeared, replaced by something younger, something pained. "Zia," he said, the word thick with 18 years of history. It was not Mama. It was the title of a beloved aunt, a sister's son. It was family. The group moved quickly, a tight knot of controlled chaos. Tessa and Alma were put in the back of the sedan, Cassian sliding in beside Tessa. His men, with the wounded Silas, piled into the SUV, and the small convoy sped away from the docks, leaving the rusted maze behind. Tessa was now, officially, in the wolf's den. As they climbed the dark, concrete stairs of a seemingly derelict warehouse on the East Pier, Nero, who was behind them, spoke, his voice laced with grudging amusement. "Not bad, boss. You folded yourself over her like a human shield." Cassian, his back to them, did not stop walking. He just shot a look over his shoulder, a glare so cold it could have frozen fire, but he did not deny it. The elevator opened directly into the safe house, and Tessa's jaw almost dropped. The warehouse exterior had been a crumbling brick facade, but this was a penthouse. It was a sprawling, cavernous space that screamed new money and bad taste, clearly the former lair of a rap producer from the early 2000s. Black leather couches, a chrome bar, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a staggering billion-dollar view of Harborview and the Black, churning river below. To Tessa, who lived in a single room above a gym, it was like stepping onto another planet. This was Cassian's world. Nero and Jax immediately took Alma to a back bedroom, while Silas, bleeding through his coat, was guided to the kitchen by Beaumont, who began pulling a full medical kit from a cabinet. Cassian ignored them all. He strode to a panel on the wall, and what Tessa had assumed was a modern art piece slid away, revealing a bank of monitors displaying at least 20 different camera feeds, docks, alleyways, the lobby downstairs. He was the eye of a spider, and this was his web. He picked up a secure satellite phone and made a call. His back to Tessa, his voice was all business. "The Bellman sniper took a shot. We lost the trail, but we hit one of his. I'm pulling my men back to sweep the east side." He was lying, masterfully. He was reporting to the Varelli Harbor Council, pretending his hunt for Alma was ongoing, all while she was safe in his guest room. Tessa watched, mesmerized and terrified. This was not a gangster. This was a general. He had a system. He had shadow accountants, as Alma had called them. He had a small armory, which Jax was now checking in a reinforced closet. He had a plan for every possible contingency. She walked toward the kitchen, needing a glass of water, anything to feel normal. She stopped. On the massive granite island, next to a bowl of plastic fruit, lay a black handgun. It was sleek, oily, and looked absolutely lethal. A small, involuntary sound escaped her throat. It was too much. The diner, the shooting, the penthouse, and now this object, designed only to kill, sitting where food should be. Cassian ended his call and turned, catching her expression. He saw her staring at the weapon, her face pale, her whole body recoiled. He moved quickly, not at her, but to the gun, sweeping it up and securing it in a holster she hadn't seen beneath his jacket. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, all the ice gone. "I apologize," he said. "I forgot. You're not used to this." He wasn't apologizing for the gun's existence, but for his carelessness in leaving it where she, a civilian, would be frightened by it. That small distinction, that brief recognition of her world, made him suddenly dangerously human. in the living area. Alma was sitting up on the couch, wrapped in an expensive cashmere throw. Cassian brought her a glass of water, his movements gentle. "You always were the smart one. Passerotto," Alma said, using an old Italian nickname, Little Sparrow. "But you were always too sentimental. That sentimentality is what kept me looking for you," he said, his voice hard, not looking at her. "No," Alma said softly. "You looked for me because you needed the ledger. I taught you how to read people. Cassian, I taught you how to hide the books when you were just a boy, how to see the truth behind their eyes, and I see you now. You locked away the boy who lost me, didn't you?" Cassian's jaw tightened. He turned away, unable to meet her gaze. The memory of her death was not just a strategic loss. It was the event that had forged the boss and frozen the man. "We have a problem," Silas said, walking in, his arm in a fresh sling. He pointed the remote at a large screen, turning on the local news. A reporter from HVN 12 stood in the rain, lights flashing behind her. "A hail of gunfire in the abandoned Pier 7 container yard. Police sources are baffled, suggesting a new, violent escalation in the ongoing." Cassian swore, low and vicious. "So much for a quiet meet. Ronaldo will know by morning. He'll know we made contact. He'll know I have her." "He'll know you failed to get her," Alma corrected. "He thinks you were there to exchange, and she was a no-show." "It doesn't matter," Cassian snapped. Now in full command, he motioned for his men, and they gathered around the bar, a council of war. Tessa stood to the side, feeling like a ghost, but refusing to be invisible. "He'll escalate," Cassian said. "We have to move first. We call a reconciliation, a full family meeting. We'll set it for the end of the week. Mariner Ferry 17. Neutral ground, our terms. The bellman won't come just because you call, boss," Jack said. "He will if I promise him what he wants," Cassian said, his eyes finding Alma. "I will promise him the white ledger, opened by the one person who can—" "Cassian, no," Alma said. "This is the end game. Zia, it's the only way to get him in a room where we control the exits." "Tessa," Cassian said, suddenly noticing her. "Go with Alma. To the other room. This doesn't concern you." "The hell it doesn't," Tessa said, her voice sharp and clear, surprising everyone, including herself. The men all turned to look at her. "A man just tried to put a bullet through my chest because of her. I am standing in a rap mogul's fortress because of you. I was just shielded by your body in a rain of gunfire. It concerns me. If I'm going to protect her, I need to know what's happening. I'm not leaving." Cassian stared at her. A long, appraising look. The defiance, the raw, terrified courage, it was the same thing that made her stand up to him in the diner. He found himself, against all reason, respecting it, attracted to it. He gave a curt nod. "Fine, you stay." Beaumont, who had been silent, suddenly spoke, and he had been outside, checking the truck Tessa had driven, the one left in the alley. He walked in, holding a small, black disc between his fingers. "He won't have to wait until morning, boss," Beaumont said, placing the device on the counter. This was on the fender of the girl's truck. GPS tracker, old model, but effective. The blood drained from Tessa's face. "How long? Hard to say, but Ronaldo wasn't the only one who found your diner. Someone else was already following you, which means they tracked you to the gym, and they tracked you here." The safe house, with its 20 cameras and steel doors, was no longer safe. "We can't move her now," Cassian said, the walls closing in. "Not until we sweep the exits. We wait until dawn." He looked at his men. "We stay. 1-hour shifts, all doors. Jax, you're on the roof. Silas, you're on the monitors. Nero, Beaumont, the hall. I'll take the first watch here." His men nodded, dispersing to their posts. The sprawling, opulent penthouse suddenly felt like a trap. The artificial safety evaporated, leaving only the cold reality of the night, and in that confined, dangerous space. Tessa was left alone with the man who had brought the storm. The storm raged, throwing sheets of water against the floor-to-ceiling glass. Inside the penthouse, the power flickered twice, plunging the opulent room into momentary darkness before a backup generator kicked in, leaving only a few ambient lights on. The effect was unsettling, making the city lights below seem like the only stable thing in the world. Alma was asleep in the small guest room. Exhausted by the night's events, Nero and Beaumont were on a silent rotation in the living room, while Jax and the wounded Silas monitored the exits and the camera feeds. The apartment was a fortress on high alert, humming with a low, anxious energy, restless. Tessa had walked up a spiral staircase she found, which led to a small, glass-enclosed observatory on the roof, a sort of private patio built to look at the stars. Now, it just offered a panoramic view of the storm. Cassian was already there, standing in the dark, watching the rain. He had taken watch, but this felt different. This was the man, not the boss, seeking a moment alone. Tessa almost retreated, but he spoke without turning. "You can't sleep either. My bed is a cot above a boxing gym," she said, joining him near the glass, though keeping a careful distance. "This place is too quiet and too loud." The wind howled, rattling the thick glass. He finally turned to look at her. "You are afraid." "Of course I am," she snapped, the fear making her angry. This is not my life. I'm a waitress. I have a job I've probably lost. I have an apartment I'll be evicted from. I have a sister, and if I disappear, who pays her bills? Who sits with her at the hospital?" The words tumbled out, her real-world panic finally overtaking the surreal, adrenaline-fueled terror of the Mafia war. Cassian was silent for a moment. He had dealt with threats, bullets, and betrayals. This raw, civilian fear was a language he rarely heard. "Your sister," he said, his voice softer. "Piper. At St. Delia Medical." Tessa froze. How do you know that?" "I know everything about anyone I bring into a safe house," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "She has a congenital heart defect. The experimental treatment is not fully covered by her insurance." "Do not," Tessa whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "Use her against me." "I am not," Cassian said, stepping closer. "I am telling you that her bills, from this moment, are paid. The Varelli Family Foundation, the legitimate one, has sponsored her treatment. In full. Consider it payment for services rendered. You kept my Zia alive when my own family wanted her dead." Tessa stared at him, speechless. This was not the act of a brute. It was a calculated, precise act of kindness, a kindness that was also a transaction. He was not just a killer. He was a man who understood debt, and he paid it. It was a value she understood, a value she respected. The wind gusted, a low whistle seeping through the seals of the glass. Tessa shivered. Her thin diner uniform useless against the cold. Cassian, seeing the shiver, did not hesitate. He shrugged off his heavy, tailored suit jacket, the one she had been pressed against in the container yard, and draped it over her shoulders. It was impossibly warm, and it enveloped her. The scent she'd detected earlier was overwhelming now, rain. Expensive wool, leather, and the faint, sharp tang of gunpowder. It was the scent of danger and absolute safety. A terrifying contradiction. She clutched the lapels, and her fingers brushed the bruise on her wrist, the one he had left when he'd pulled her to safety. He saw the tiny wince of pain as her fingers touched the mark. His gaze softened. He reached out, not with the speed he'd used in the yard, but slowly, giving her time to pull away. His fingers, warm and calloused, gently touched the discolored skin on her wrist. His thumb traced the outline of the bruise. "Did I do this?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. It was not an apology. It was a question, an acknowledgement. His eyes, when they met hers, were not asking if he had hurt her. They were asking if she was okay. That simple, unexpected moment of care, that gentle touch from the most dangerous man in Harborview, broke the last of her defenses. He was standing very close now. The space between them was electric, filled with the roar of the storm outside and the silent, rapid beat of her own heart. He looked at her mouth, then back to her eyes. A question. She didn't pull away. He leaned in. Slow, controlled. The first kiss was not one of passion, but of intense restraint. It was a test, a discovery. His lips were firm, and he tasted like the cold air and a fierce, banked-down power. His hands, which she had seen move with lethal speed, were impossibly gentle. One hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. The other settled on the small of her back, not pulling her, just holding her, steadying her. When she leaned into the kiss, a low sound vibrated in his chest. He whispered her name against her lips, then kissed her again, deeper this time. His jacket slipped from her shoulders as his arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against him. "I will get you out of this," he murmured, his voice thick and hoarse, his forehead resting against hers. "Alive. I promise you that, Tessa." The scene shifted, the intensity overwhelming, in the glass room, with the entire rain-lashed city glittering like a broken constellation below them. They came together. It was not a gentle easing, but a desperate need for solid ground in a world that had dissolved. They were two people, a world apart, clinging to each other. They learned how to touch without inflicting pain. His jacket was a pool of black wool on the floor. Her breath hitched as she felt his heart hammering against her chest, a rhythm as wild and fast as her own. It was a moment of absolute, terrifying trust, a silent vow made as the storm broke around them. Later, they lay close. Tangled in the cashmere throw from the sofa, the storm had passed its peak, leaving a steady, drumming rain. They spoke in whispers. "What do you want?" she asked, tracing the line of his jaw. "After all this, if you get the ledger—" He was quiet for a long time. "I want to be clean," he admitted. The confession costing him? Not good. Just clean. I want to take the Varelli money, the billions in black ink, and wash it, turn it into foundations, real estate, legitimate funds. I want to build things, not just break them. "And the killing?" she asked softly. "I want to stop having to." He looked at her. "What about you? What do you want? Tessa Marlowe, besides paying hospital bills." "A cafe," she said. A small, shy smile touching her lips. A tiny one, with a blue door. Good coffee, fresh bread. A place where old women can come and get a bowl of soup, and no one has to mark it as spoiled. Two different dreams, born from two different worlds, suddenly crossing in the dark. "The ledger," he said, his voice serious. "Ronaldo thinks I want it for power, to be the new king." He pulled her closer. "I want it so I can end the game. I need to know every single chain Ronaldo has on this city, so I can cut them, all at once. It's the only way to amputate his influence without the entire city bleeding to death. I'm not just fighting him. I'm fighting my own family." They slept very little that night. When dawn finally broke, painting the wet city in shades of bruised purple and gray, they were no longer just a boss and a waitress. They were not just allies. The lines had been irrevocably blurred. The fragile peace of the dawn was shattered by the buzz of Cassian's secure phone. He was on his feet instantly, the tenderness of the night vanishing, the boss rematerializing as he dressed. Tessa sat up, pulling the cashmere throw around her, her heart sinking. Silas, his arm in a sling, met Cassian by the monitors. "It's a problem. Boss, Ronaldo didn't wait." Tessa joined them, Cassian's jacket still clutched in her hand. "What is it?" "The bellman just made his move," Silas said, his voice grim. He pointed to a blinking alert on a city-wide feed. "He grabbed 2 of our accountants from the fish market an hour ago. Men loyal to us. He's not just hunting Alma, he's cutting off your legs." Before Cassian could react, a private alert pinged on his laptop. A video file, untraceable, sent through a dozen relays. He clicked play. The image was grainy, lit by what looked like candlelight. Ronaldo, the bellman, Varelli, was sitting in a high-backed chair, looking less like a gangster and more like a decadent old priest. He was in a derelict church, surrounded by crumbling plaster and faded icons. He smiled at the camera, a wide, predatory grin. Then, he picked up a small, silver handbell and rang it. A clear, piercing sound. "The tower bells are waiting. Cassian," Ronaldo's voice rasped, "but they only ring for the one who holds the key. You want the bells to chime for you? You bring me Alma Serafino. unharmed, or I start ringing this one, for every man you have, one by one." He rang it again, a sharp, mocking ding, and the video cut to black. Alma, who had emerged from her room, was standing behind them. She was watching the black screen, her face ashen. "He's not just threatening," she said, her voice hollow. "He's telling you his plan. If I am brought to him, he will not simply take the ledger. He'll force you to open it." Cassian said. "Worse," Alma corrected. "He will force me to enter a false code, a specific sequence I designed, as a failsafe. It doesn't just lock the data, it corrupts it. It will erase every single payment record, every name, all of it." Tessa looked confused. "Isn't that good? Erase the proof? Everyone goes free." Alma shook her head, a grim light in her eyes. "Child, you do not understand. The politicians and judges on that list who are still in power, who think their past is buried, they will suddenly find their protection gone, their records wiped clean. Ronaldo will have a list of all those names, and he will be the only one. He will re-blackmail them all. And those who refuse will find their clean, erased records suddenly leak to the press, exposing them as compromised. It will cause a panic. It will bring the federal government down on this city like a hammer, and Ronaldo will be the only one left standing in the chaos. We have to go to the police," Tessa insisted, the scale of it making her sick. Cassian laughed, a short, harsh sound. "The police, Tessa. The Harborview PD is Ronaldo. Half the names in that ledger are wearing a badge. No, there's only one agency that isn't for sale. The Bureau of Interstate Crime Affairs, the BICA, and they won't listen to us, not without the entire unlocked ledger as proof." He turned to his men. "He made a mistake. That video, he's broadcasting. Trace the IP. Find that church." Silas was already at the keyboard. "He's good, boss, bouncing it all over. But he's arrogant. He's streaming from, got it, Warehouse 5, the old shipping depot. Jax, Beaumont, you're with me," Cassian ordered, grabbing his holster. "Nero, you and Silas stay with them. Bar the door. Shoot anything that isn't me." "Cassian, no," Tessa said, grabbing his arm. "This is not a debate," he said, his voice cold. "I'm not debating," she said, her voice low and fierce. "I'm not letting you go alone." She reached up, pretending to straighten his collar, her fingers fumbling, brushing his skin. "Be careful." He gave her a hard, unreadable look, then turned and was gone. Tessa stepped back. Her hand balled into a fist. She had palmed it. A tiny, button-sized microphone, one of the spares from the gym's ancient, barely used PA system. She ran to her purse, pulling out a small receiver and an old pair of earbuds. She heard the sound of Cassian's car, then static, then his voice, low and clear in her ear. "Jax, right door, Beaumont, roof, on my signal." The next 10 minutes were agony. Tessa listened to the sounds of a raid shouts, the brief, muffled sounds of a scuffle, and Cassian's curt commands. Then she heard a new voice, weak, gasping. They're not local. Boss, he hired them. Mercs from, I don't know, Eastern Europe. They were asking about her, about Alma. There was a muffled sound, then Cassian's voice, full of ice. "Marlowe, is that you? Get him up, Jax. Get Marlowe to the car. Beaumont, burn the place. Everything." Tessa ripped the earbuds out when the warehouse doors slammed shut. Cassian was back 20 minutes later. He burst into the penthouse, his face a mask of cold fury. He was carrying a man, Marlowe, who was bloody but conscious. "He's been bought," Cassian said, laying the man on the sofa. "The doorman. I saw him on the monitors as we came in. He was tailing us." Tessa's blood ran cold. The tracker. The tracker was just the appetizer. They've had eyes on this building for hours. This place is burned. They had to move. Now. "Where can we go?" Tessa asked, her voice shaking. "He's everywhere." "Not everywhere," Cassian said, a dark, dangerous glint in his eye. "We're going to the one place he'll never look, the place he just left. St. Odelia's. The abandoned church from the video. It was madness. It was brilliant. They moved in the back of a panel van, one of the Varelli-owned delivery trucks. On the way, Huddled in the dark, Alma's voice came from the corner. "Rinaldo," she said softly. "He never forgave me." "Forgave you for what?" Zia, Cassian asked. "For not loving him. 40 years ago, he was a young captain. I was the treasurer. He thought that gave him rights. I refused him. He was unkind. After that, I was the one who suggested to your grandfather that Rinaldo was too passionate, too hot-headed, to guard the family's real money. He was demoted. He's been waiting for this. For me. This is not just business, Cassian, it is a vendetta." Tessa listened, her stomach twisting. Her own feelings for Cassian, the night they had shared, suddenly felt like a spotlight on her back. If Rinaldo's obsession was this deep, what would he do to a woman Cassian had just slept with, her love? She realized was not a secret. It was a weapon, and Bellman would not hesitate to use it. They reached the church, slipping in through a crumbling side door. It was cold, damp, and smelled of incense and decay. "The meeting is in 3 days, Cassian said, his voice echoing in the nave. "At Mariner Ferry 17. I will go. I will take Alma." "And me?" Tessa asked. "You," Cassian said, his face unreadable in the dark, "will be my secret. You will stay here. You are the one thing he cannot know I have, and he is the one person who cannot find you." He led her to the side, to a row of old, carved wood confessionals. He opened one, the hinges screaming in the silence. "You will stay here," he said. "It's the safest place in the church, and the last place he'll ever look." The night before the meeting at Mariner Ferry 17 was heavy with an unnatural quiet. St. Odelia's, the abandoned church, seemed to hold its breath. Tessa, hidden in the dark, musty confines of the confessional, tried to control her own breathing. From the nave, where Alma was keeping watch, a thin, frail voice drifted over the dusty pews. Alma was humming, an old Italian prayer, a sound so heartbreakingly peaceful that it felt like a violation of the space. It was a single, fragile moment of grace before the end. The peace was annihilated. The confessional door, rotted on its hinges, did not open. It was ripped clean from the frame. Tessa screamed as rough, gloved hands seized her, dragging her out onto the cold stone floor. She fought, kicking and twisting, but they were professionals. There were 4 of them, dressed in the dark green, heavy-duty uniforms of the city sanitation department, but they carried silenced pistols, and their movements were military. They ignored Alma, who had risen to her feet by the altar. Their focus was entirely on Tessa. "Package secured," one man grunted into a shoulder mic. Nero was good for it, right where he said she'd be. The betrayal was a physical blow. Nero, the loyal guard, the one who had teased Cassian about shielding her, his brother, as they would discover later, was suffocating under a gambling debt to Rinaldo. The tracker he'd found on her truck had been a plant, but the one he'd placed in the safe house, the one that had followed them here, was all too real. The men did not raise their weapons to Alma. They simply backed away, dragging the struggling Tessa with them. The leader paused at the door, his face obscured by the darkness. "The bellman sends his regards. Vecchia," he spat at Alma. "He's tired of chasing old ghosts. He wants a trade." He yanked Tessa by the hair, forcing her to her feet. "The old woman and the bell code. In exchange for the girl." He shoved Tessa forward. He knows what she is to the boss. He understands emotional leverage. Cassian was on the pier, scouting the ferry landing with Jax, when the call came from Alma. He listened, his body going utterly still. The sounds of the river, the distant traffic, all faded. When he hung up, his face was carved from granite. "Nero is a dead man," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Then, the calm shattered. The contained, controlled boss evaporated, replaced by the raw fury of the man. He drove his fist into a steel cargo container, a sharp, ringing crack that echoed over the water. "He has her. He has her." "I'm going in. I'm going in alone." "Boss, you can't." Jack started, but Cassian was already moving, his hand on his weapon. "Do not." A voice crackled over the secure comms line, sharp and commanding. It was Alma, back in the armored car. "Cassian, you let your emotion lead you now. She dies. Ronaldo is counting on you to be a boy, not a boss. You will stand down, and you will let me lead." He froze, his back to Jack's, his whole body vibrating with the need for violence. He was at war with himself, the man who had held her in the storm versus the leader who had to win the war. "We changed the terms. Cassian," Alma's voice insisted, relentless. "We are not trading. We are dictating. We proceed with the meeting. You and I, we will walk onto that ferry. I will use the code in front of the entire council, and then," she paused, "I will announce that the full, unencrypted ledger is already linked to the Bureau of Interstate Crime Affairs, a dead man's switch. If I do not input a countersignal within 6 hours, the entire history of this city, every dirty cop, every bought judge goes straight to the bica." The genius of it hit him. It was a shield. Ronaldo could not kill Alma, or he'd lose the ability to stop the transfer, and he could not kill Tessa, because she was the only leverage he had left to make Alma stop it. He had to choose. He could attack the cold storage unit where they were holding her a blind, suicidal rush that would almost certainly get her killed in the crossfire, or he could walk into the lion's den, play his part, and build a federal fortress around her, buying them time. He chose the more agonizing path. "We go to the meeting," he said, his voice raw. He got back in the car. His eyes, in the green glow of the dashboard, were bloodshot, the pupils black and wide. Tessa woke up aching on a damp concrete floor. The air smelled of brine and old fish, a walk-in freezer, turned off, but still bitterly cold. Her hands were bound behind her with a zip tie that bit deep into her wrists. 2 of the men were at the door, smoking. "He's not coming for you," one of them said, amused. "He's a boss. He'll cut his losses." Tessa pushed herself up, her body shaking from the cold, but her voice was steady. "You think so?" she called out, her voice echoing in the small, tiled room. "He's not the one I'm worried about. It's your boss, Ronaldo. He's just a pathetic, dirty old man, isn't he? So afraid of losing his money, he has to hide behind sanitation uniforms." The guard, a thick-necked man, crossed the room and backhanded her, the force of it snapping her head back. "Shut your mouth!" Tessa spat a small drop of blood onto the floor and looked up at him, her eyes blazing. Afraid of a woman who's been dead for 18 years, afraid of the future. The guard raised his hand again, truly angry now. But his phone buzzed. He answered it, listened, his expression changing. "Yeah, boss. She's awake." "Yeah, she's got a mouth on her." He listened. Understood. He hung up and stepped back, holstering his weapon. He looked at Tessa with a new, colder interest. "The bellman says to keep you alive. You're the thing that makes Varelli do what we want." Left alone in the freezing dark, Tessa squeezed her eyes shut. She did not cry. She would not give them that. Instead, she forced her mind to the penthouse, to the sound of the rain, the feeling of his jacket over her shoulders, his promise whispered against her hair. "I will get you out of this. Alive." It was not a memory of romance. It was an anchor. It was a contract. "You promised," she whispered to the cold, damp air. "I'm going to make you keep that promise." The black sedan moved through the pre-dawn mist. Alma sat beside Cassian. He was a statue, his hands gripping the wheel. "Love is a complicated weapon, Cassian," Alma said quietly into the silence. "It makes you weak against the people you shouldn't kill." "No." She paused, letting the words settle. "And it makes you strong against the people you must." Cassian said nothing. He drove. The car pulled up to the long, dark pier. Mariner Ferry 17 sat waiting in the water, a massive, silent shadow. The final stage was set. Mariner Ferry 17 was not a ship. It was a massive, floating warehouse, permanently moored at the end of the longest pier, converted into a private meeting hall for the Varelli family, a fortress of glass and steel. Its main room offered a commanding view of the river, while its true secret lay beneath the floor. Cassian and Alma walked the long pier, alone. His men were already in position. The main hall was filled with ghosts. Ronaldo the bellman Varelli sat at the head of a long steel table. flanked by half a dozen aging Capo's men who had grown rich and lazy on the old ways. Their bodyguards lined the walls, a ring of cheap suits and tense shoulders. Ronaldo smiled when they entered. It was a rotten, yellow smile. "Alma Serafino, Dio mio, you have not aged well." He looked at Cassian. 18 years, and this is what you bring me, a ghost. "I brought what was promised," Cassian said, his voice flat. He gestured to the center of the room. "Open it, Ronaldo. Let the council see the vault." Ronaldo nodded. A section of the floor slid away, revealing a sunken electronic safe, its keypad dark. "After you, Alma," Ronaldo sneered. "It's time to ring the final bell for you." Alma walked forward, ignoring him. She stood before the console. Her thin, frail fingers, the ones that used to tremble, were now perfectly steady. She did not enter a number. She hummed, a short, melodic phrase. The console's microphone lit up, green. She hummed a second, different phrase. With a heavy, pneumatic hiss, the vault unlocked. A platform rose from the floor, presenting a single, silver hard drive in a climate-controlled case. On the small screen above it, a message in green. Block letters pulsed, Bika Link armed. Alma had not been idle in her 18 years of exile. She had built this. The dead man's switch. Ronaldo saw the message, his face, a mask of smug victory, contorted into a mask of pure, primal rage. The trap was not for him, it was for them. "Kill them!" he screamed, sweeping his arm forward. "Kill them both!" The bodyguards surged, hands diving for weapons, but they were too slow. "Now," Cassian roared. The meeting hall erupted. The glass ceiling exploded inward as Silas and Beaumont descended on high-tension wires, firing suppressed weapons before their feet even hit the floor. They were not aiming to kill. They were aiming to disable. Knees, shoulders, hands. It was a symphony of brutal, tactical precision. Cassian moved at the first sign of Ronaldo's turn. He didn't draw a weapon. He grabbed Alma, pulling her low, shoving her behind the steel console just as the room filled with gunfire. From outside, sirens suddenly wailed to life, loud, piercing, and close. Cassian grunted, checking his comms. It was a bluff. Fake police cars, staged by Ronaldo's men on the pier, meant to frighten any curious onlookers. It was a theatrical move from an old man. It also meant Ronaldo hadn't called in the real authorities. He still wanted the ledger, and he still believed he could control this. He still had Tessa. He still had a chance. "The drive," Cassian yelled to Alma over the gunfire. Ronaldo, scrambling behind the table, screamed at his men. "Get the drive, forget them. Get the drive." He knew what Cassian wanted. Ronaldo didn't just want the ledger to erase it, he wanted to sell it, piece by piece, to the highest bidder Russians. Offshore corporations, rival families. He would make Harborview a slave to the highest bidder for the next 20 years. Cassian wanted to end the game. Ronaldo wanted to sell the whole board. Cassian lunged, sliding across the polished floor, his hands closing on the silver hard drive just as a bullet sparked where his head had been. "Zia, the switch!" he yelled. Alma, protected by the console, reached up. Her finger hovered over the screen. She did not press the send-all button. She pressed the one next to it. Partial transmission. The screen flashed. A new timer appeared. 20:00. "What did you do?" Cassian yelled, providing covering fire for Silas. "I gave us a clock," Alma shouted back, her voice ringing with a strength Tessa would have recognized. "The data is sending, but it's throttled 20 minutes. Ronaldo can't stop it. But the Bika won't get the full file before that timer hits 0. It gives you time to get the girl." At that moment, Silas's voice crackled in Cassian's earpiece, frantic. "Boss, they're moving her, Ronaldo's men. They're not in the freezer. They're on the water. Garbage barge 4. It's moored right off the pier. They're prepping to dump her. If Ronaldo dies and that data doesn't send, she's the failsafe." Cassian looked at the timer. 19 minutes. He looked at Ronaldo, who was now in a full-blown firefight with Jax. He looked at Alma. She had seen the realization on his face. She knew. She nodded, her face grim. "Go. Save the girl. I will hold the clock." She retrieved a pistol from a fallen guard, her hand steady, and took aim at one of Ronaldo's men who was trying to reach the console. She fired. Once. The man dropped. Cassian didn't need to be told twice. He was no longer the boss. He was the man who had made a promise in the rain. He sprinted from the hall, ignoring the bullets that zipped past him. He burst through the side doors onto the pier, the fake sirens wailing. The rain was coming down again, cold and hard. He saw it. Barge 4, 100 yards out, connected by a narrow, slick walkway. There were 2 men on deck, and a third dragging a small, struggling figure toward the edge, Tessa. He ran, launching himself into the rain, a single-minded missile of controlled rage, ready to tear the world apart to keep his word. He hit the barge with a sound of wet metal, his shoes sliding on the slick steel. The rain was a curtain, blurring the lights from the pier. The 2 secondary guards turned, surprised, but Cassian was not there for them. He was already moving past them. The leader, the one who had taken her from the church, had Tessa in a brutal grip, her back to his chest, her feet dangling inches from the barge's edge. The black, churning water waited below. "That's far enough, Varelli," the man screamed over the wind, pressing a pistol to Tessa's temple. "Drop your weapon or she goes for a swim." Cassian stopped, a good 20 feet away. He was soaked, his dark hair plastered to his skull. His suit ruined. He held his own gun, but it was pointed at the deck. "Let her go," Cassian said. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, terrifying command that cut through the noise of the storm. "I said drop it. I'm not afraid to. I am not negotiating." Cassian cut him off. The boss was back, absolute and cold. "You let her go. Right now, I will let you walk off this pier and disappear. That is the only deal you get." The man laughed, a high, panicked sound. "Walk the bellman is paying double for this. He knew you'd be stupid. He knew you'd come for the girl." "He was right," Cassian said. "I did." The man adjusted his grip, pulling Tessa tighter. It was the mistake Cassian had been waiting for. The man's body shifted, exposing a sliver of his thigh for less than a second. The gunshot was flat and dry in the wet air. Cassian did not aim for the head or the chest. He aimed for the leg. The kidnapper roared in pain, his grip on Tessa spasming open as his leg collapsed beneath him. He fired his own weapon, a wild shot into the night sky, and stumbled back. Cassian was already moving, closing the distance in 3 long strides. He didn't even look at the other 2 guards, who were frozen in shock. He shoved the wounded man hard, sending him sprawling onto the steel deck, and grabbed Tessa, yanking her back from the edge, pulling her into his arms. She was shaking, so hard he could feel it through his own body. She was soaking wet, colder than the rain, and she made a choked, gasping sound as he crushed her to him. He buried his face in her wet hair, his body shielding hers, his heart hammering with a violence that had nothing to do with the fight. "You're safe," he murmured, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable. "I have you. You're safe." He felt her hands still bound behind her, struggling. She was trying to speak, her words lost in a gasping sob. My hands." He eased his grip, his gaze softening as he saw her. He pulled a small, thin knife from a sheath in his boot. "Hold still!" His fingers, so steady with a gun, were just as precise as he slid the blade under the thick plastic of the zip ties, cutting them away from her raw, chafed wrists. The moment she was free, she didn't hit him. She didn't run. She grabbed the front of his shirt, her fists bunching the material. "You left me," she whispered, the accusation born of pure terror. You went to the meeting. You left me." He grabbed her face, his hands hard on her jaw, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were raw, desperate, all the ice gone. "Listen to me, Tessa. I did not choose the family over you. I went to the meeting because of you, not instead of you. If I had come here first, you would be dead. Ronaldo would have killed us both. I had to build the shield. I had to get Alma to activate that timer. It was the only way to guarantee I could get you out, to give us a future. Do you understand me? I chose us." The explanation hung in the air, a raw confession in the middle of the chaos. Action first, words later. It was the only way he knew, a new sound, high and electronic, cut through the air, a piercing alarm from the ferry hall. Cassian grabbed her hand. "The timer, come on!" They ran. Scrambling off the barge, leaving the groaning men behind, they burst back into the main hall just as the world changed. On the large console screen, the timer, which had been counting down, flashed 0000. The screen went black for a second, then lit up with a new, final message. Green block letters. Transmission to Beacon completed. The fight was over. The hall was a ruin of upturned chairs and wounded men. Jax, Silas, and Beaumont were standing, weapons down over a subdued group. In the center of the room, Ronaldo, the bellman, Varelli was on his knees. Alma stood over him, her small frame rigid. She was holding Ronaldo's own ornate pistol to his temple. She had not fired. She had waited. When she saw Cassian and Tessa safe, she lowered the gun. She nudged Ronaldo hard, pushing him toward his nephew. "This is your family, Cassian," Alma said, her voice exhausted. "Your decision." Cassian walked forward, his wet shoes silent on the floor. Ronaldo looked up, spitting blood. "You don't have it," the old man rasped. "You're not your grandfather. You don't have the stomach to finish it." Cassian raised his pistol, his arm steady, aiming directly between Ronaldo's eyes. The hall was dead silent, save for the rain. Tessa held her breath, her hand covering her mouth. This was the moment, the man or the boss. He held the pose for 5 long, agonizing seconds. Then, with a sigh, he lowered his arm. He dropped the magazine from his gun, letting it clatter to the floor. He ejected the single round from the chamber, letting it roll away. "It's over," he said. "No more bodies. No more ghosts." It was the choice Alma had waited 18 years to see. As if his words were a cue, the fake sirens outside were drowned out by a deafening new sound, the roar of helicopter blades, the thud of boots on the pier, and the splintering of doors. BICA federal agents, hands in the air now. The hall was flooded with men in black tactical gear. They moved with a professional speed that made Ronaldo's men look like amateurs. They cuffed the old capos, secured Ronaldo, and disarmed Cassian's men, who offered no resistance. In the midst of the chaos, Alma's strength finally gave out. The adrenaline, the sickness, and the relief crashed over her. She coughed, a deep, racking sound, and her legs buckled. Cassian was at her side in an instant, and Tessa was on the other. They caught her, supporting her weight between them. It was a perfect, strange tableau. The mafia boss, the waitress, and the treasurer, united as a family, surrounded by the flashing blue and red lights of the federal government. A man in a sharp suit, Agent Coulter on his vest, approached them, ignoring the medics who were already rushing to Alma. "Cassian Varelli," Coulter said, his voice flat. "You've just handed us the biggest public corruption case in American history. You've also just destroyed the entire Varelli organization." "I destroyed the old guard," Cassian corrected, his voice tired. "You need me to make sense of that data. You need a witness. Without me, it's just numbers." Coulter nodded, a small, grim smile. "That's the deal. You give us everything, every offshore account, every hidden asset, every name. You testify. In exchange, you get a new life, witness protection, a light, suspended sentence for your cooperation. It's the only way you walk out of here clean." It was the very thing he had wanted. The exit. The absolution. Cassian looked past the agent to Tessa. She was watching him, her face streaked with grime, her eyes knowing this was his choice, but it was theirs too. He turned to her, and in the middle of the federal raid, the shouting and the chaos faded to a dull roar. His voice was low. Just for her. "You still want that coffee shop?" It wasn't a question. It was a proposal. No ring, no knee, just a new life, bought with blood and secrets. "It'll have to be somewhere else," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, under a different name. Tessa looked at him, the man who had pulled her into a war and then shielded her from it. She looked at Alma, being gently lifted onto a stretcher, her eyes open, watching them. They had won. They had set the past on fire. She nodded. A single, sharp movement. "Yes." 3 months later, the air was different. It was clean, smelling of cut grass and the wide, slow river of Mapleford, Pennsylvania, harbor view, with its smell of salt, rust, and blood, was a lifetime away. On Main Street, a new cafe with a bright blue door had opened. A small, neatly painted sign hung in the window, Bell Harbor. Inside, Tessa, now with the name Anna, wiped down the espresso machine. Her hair was a little shorter, the exhaustion in her eyes replaced by a tired but genuine contentment. The bruises were long gone, but she sometimes found her hand drifting to the thin silver chain around her neck. On it hung a single, tiny, intricately carved bell, a replica of the ones at San Aurelio, a gift from him. Cal, as he was now known, was in the back, checking inventory. He wore a simple white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. There were no $1,000 suits, no bodyguards, no visible weapons. His hair was shorter, simpler. He was, to anyone who looked, just a man running a small business with his wife. But 3 times a month, a black nondescript sedan would park at the corner, and Cal would get in. He would be gone for 2 days, driven to a secure federal building to meet with Agent Coulter and the Bica lawyers, painstakingly turning his memories of every dirty deal, every offshore account, every hidden asset into the legal firepower that was dismantling a generation of corruption. He was still Cassian Varelli in those rooms, but here, in this cafe, he was just Cal, her partner. Tessa glanced at the tablet on the counter, which chimed with an incoming video call. She smiled, tapping the screen. Alma's face, thinner but brighter, filled the screen. She was sitting in a sunny room, a garden visible behind her. "Cara mia," she said, her voice clear. The BISA-protected nursing facility had done wonders for her lungs. "Hi, Zia," Tessa said, the name feeling natural on her tongue. "Look who is here," Alma said, turning the tablet. Piper. Her sister was sitting next to her, her cheeks rosy, her hair grown back. The foundation Cassian had set up was more than real. Piper was not just stable, she was thriving. "Ciao," Anna, Piper waved, then with a shy, practiced accent. "Come stai? Sto bene." Tessa laughed, her heart full. Alma was teaching her sister Italian. There was no cruelty, no abuse, just 2 survivors finding a new, strange, wonderful family. In the corner of the cafe, a small television was mounted, playing the midday news. The anchor, a woman with serious glasses, was speaking. And the fallout from the dismantling of the Varelli crime organization continues. In a shocking development, 3 Harborview City Council members and a high-ranking judge were indicted this morning, all linked to the anonymous Harborview whistleblower. The Bica has stated that more arrests are pending. An old man at the counter, stirring his coffee, grunted, "Good riddance. Hope they throw away the key." Can you imagine the kind of person who knew all that? "No," Tessa said, handing him a receipt. "I really can't." The nights were sometimes still hard. The previous week, Tessa had woken at 2 a.m. to find Cal sitting on the edge of their bed, his body rigid, his breathing fast and shallow. He was back on the ferry, the gunfire, the timer, the agonizing choice. She had moved, not to startle him, but to ground him. She sat behind him, wrapping her arms around his chest, her hands linking over his heart. She said nothing, but she mirrored the actions he had taken on that first, terrifying night in the penthouse. Her hand moved to his hair, her fingers tracing the back of his neck, her presence a silent, steady anchor. "I'm here," she had whispered into his back. "It's over. We're here." He had unclenched, his hands finding hers, his body sinking back into her, into the safety of the present. Love, she was learning, was the only antidote to trauma. They were building a life. "I'm thinking, a food truck," she said, as they closed up shop one evening, counting the register. Bell Harbor on the go. "A truck," he said, stacking receipts. "An entirely mobile, high-risk, low-margin asset I don't know. We can use the extra from last quarter. Piper's treatments are paid, but this is our money, legal money." He looked at the small pile of cash, then at her, a slow, real smile spreading across his face. "You have any idea how much easier it was to make money when I could just threaten people," he joked. "This is better," she said, kissing him. "This is harder and it's better." One afternoon, a package arrived. It had no return address, just the secure, coded stamp of the Federal Witness Program. Inside, there was no letter, just a single faded photograph. A very young Alma, vibrant and strong, stood beside a small, dark-haired boy in Italy. They were standing directly beneath the great bell tower of San Aurelio. Tucked into the frame was a small note, written in Alma's elegant, shaky script. The bell rang for the right one. Tessa smiled, her eyes blurring. She bought a small bunch of bluebells from the florist next door and put them in a vase on the counter. The story closes on a crisp autumn afternoon. The cafe is warm, smelling of coffee and cinnamon. Tessa is at the counter, watching the street. Through the window, she sees Cal Cassian on the sidewalk. He's holding Piper's hand, the two of them just back from a walk. He's laughing, a real, unguarded laugh, as he kneels to show her something on his phone. A new family, forged in fire, now living in the light. A customer, a man she doesn't recognize, gets up to leave. He'd been quiet, reading a newspaper. He places his payment on the counter and nods. As Tessa goes to clear it, she sees he's left a generous tip, and next to it, a single, old, bronze Italian coin. It is an echo, a sign that the old world, the world of symbols and whispers, still remembers them. Tessa freezes for just a second. Then, she smiles. She picks up the coin and drops it into the tip jar, the sound a dull, meaningless clink. Cassian and Piper come through the door, bringing the cold, fresh air with them. He walks behind the counter, his hand finding hers, squeezing it. She squeezes back. They are together. They have changed the legacy. The past is just a story. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting the hype button. It truly helps get these stories out to more listeners.